woke turns to shit, okay? It's true.
Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the DragonShip. Happy Sunday to all you guys, and welcome all the viewers that are joining us, all two of you right now. Skull, so glad that you're here. We're living the dream here on the DragonShip. Hope you're living the dream out there. We know the secret, and you should too. We're going to have a great conversation today. Let me introduce our panelists, and then we'll get started. I'm RP THOR. You can find me at becomedurable.com and check me out there. We got Mark Daniels. Introduce yourself and say hi. Mark, you there? Yep. Mark, I'm not hearing a word. You're losing mute. Am I muted? Chat, tell me if we're muted. Looks like
I can hear you just fine.
All right. Looks like we're not hearing Mark, so we'll go ahead and introduce you, Huds. Huds, what's going on, man?
Sure. So, just brief introduction. I know I've been here before, but I'm a dating coach. Work with men of all ages, primarily divorced men, getting them back on their feet. I just got the first hardcover copy of my first book, and it looks like this is a good publisher. So I'm really excited as I finish the second one that I probably am going to be using them.
I'm so excited for you because, I'm not an author, but I'm working on a manuscript right now. Respect. It's it's not the easiest thing in the world to get your point across in a logical and reasonable fashion to where people want to, hear it and look at it. So that sounds fantastic. Can you just briefly tell us what it's about?
So the first book was the first text, which is it's slightly shorter, and it's how to start a conversation on dating apps in 5 different ways and analyzing it with examples from my personal experience. The second one's going to be, it's called Dating App Mastery, and it's diving deeper into it. Like how do you perform everything from there? Like the first book was getting started, and then the second book is going to be how do you actually make it all happen?
Yeah, that's fantastic. Well, we're glad that you're on the panel, and we have a new face on the panel, Sam.
Hey, how's it going?
For a while, you and I got to hang out in Miami at the CME.
Yep.
If you don't know what the CME is, it was the Conference of Masculine Excellence. And you know what I really appreciate, man? You really helped me out there. Thank you so much, Skull, brother.
You got it. Hey, so my name is Sam Prashansky. I run a couple of different businesses, some of them developing websites, creating software, teaching you how to become a software engineer. You can find me at Instagram at Proshanskinator, which is long, so I'll type in the chat for you guys. But yeah, and I also work a couple different web development IT gigs. Been around the space for a little while. I've learned a lot from these guys. I've been working out. I've been in the game for a while, so Thor invited me on, so I appreciate being here, and
Absolutely.
Glad to see Huds again for the first time it's been almost more than a year. So,
dude, it might be since we roomed together in Miami.
Yeah, and then I moved here, right? Yes, that was like April 21. So
what a small world. I mean, we're gonna have to do a meetup again. I know, Hud, you got something going on real quick here. Just go ahead and announce that again. There's a meetup coming up right now, right?
Absolutely, yeah. We're going to Nashville in the fall in the October timeframe. So if anybody is interested in that and they're a part of one of these groups, feel free to reach out to me on Instagram at the Hudsman, and we could probably get you in.
That's fantastic, man. I love those things because, in our space, it's important. I mean, we become close even through this medium and other mediums socially, and then we meet in real life, and it's just we click, enjoy things, and it's a good way to network with men. It's kind of what the DragonShip's all about, both the paid subscription and, of course, the YouTube show here, which is kind of our panel version in a condensed format with a little bit of censoring smattered in. So let's bring Wraith back up. Wraith, tell us how you doing, brother? You're muted, my friend. Tell us what you're up to. Like them new glasses.
I'm doing good, man.
Good. So Wraith is one of our senior members here, original member. He's got the red lenses on, so he's got some. So does Mark. So we can see finally at the red pill lens with a positive. Mark, how you doing, man? Mark's inspiration. You're muted. Let's unmute and let's hear what you're doing. You're out there as an international traveler right now, right?
Yeah.
I'm great. I'm in Punta Cana enjoying this Caribbean breeze. You can find me on Mark Daniels, Mark's Inspiration on YouTube, Instagram at Mark's Inspiration. I have a couple books out, Coming Back Home, The True Adventure of Mark Daniels, and The Power is Within by me too. And my website is marksinspiration.com if you'd like to get my help personally. And I'm just glad to be part of this THOR. I enjoy coming here every Sunday and glad I could tune in from down here. Wouldn't have missed it.
Oh, we love it, man. We love you too. And you know what? All respect. Writing those books is not an easy thing, as I'm finding out. It's way different than I thought. So, you know, that's fantastic. We see your eye candy in the background.
Yeah,
nice
she's
work,
trying to
my
hide
Viking
out there.
friend.
Yeah.
Exactly. And Laurent, we are really international day coming from Punta Cana, and here we are, Tokyo, Japan. I understand it's about what, 8 a.m. there? You're up bright and early and ready to go, Laurent?
Yeah, it's 8:12. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. So this is Laurent in Tokyo, and I want to thank you, Alex Huds, for the production of what we've done recently with the finance series. So thank you very much.
You know what? Go ahead and Huds, if you want to announce what that is. I mean, obviously our viewers here cannot join; it's closed, but you want to briefly tell them what you've put together as a producer with myself and Laurent for our membership?
Absolutely. And thank you so much, Laurent. Like that really, I really appreciate it. So we have a course going on right now called The Plunder, and it is open to all, well, not all, but most paid communities within this space. We've offered it to them, where Laurent is one of our teachers, or he's our main instructor. Laurent is a multimillionaire out of Tokyo. And then we also have Jimmy Miller, who is the Texas Chad, who is a multimillionaire out of Texas. And, we got two sides of the globe coming together and teaching people how to make money and survive in a falling market. And we had our first webinar this past week, and it was phenomenal. So if you are a part of any of the paid memberships within this community, definitely reach out to us, and we'd probably be able to get you in there.
Yeah, it is pretty fantastic, and it really takes it right to the lowest level. Most of us were not educated about how money actually works, how the economy works, and our place within it, and how we choose to operate within it. Thank you, Laurent. Appreciate that. And we got a TJ Hunter up here, back from his hiatus of moving his household with his beautiful wife.
It's been a trip and a half. We're still trying to unpack, and then not to be a downer, but in the middle of all that, over the 4th, I had to go home on emergency leave to see mom. She's not doing too well. So anyway, yeah, apologies about not being with the team.
Yeah, our sympathies go out to that, and you're good man supporting it. That's a tough thing,
Yeah, thank you.
We'll do an episode on some of those things, passing of loved ones and friends, because some of us are in that space. All of us have felt it, and it might be a good episode to do sometime. Once things are settled down. Well, it's good to have you here, TJ. We're excited, man.
Good to be back.
Awesome.
Good to be back.
I mean, look at the panel. What a wide and varied panel. Guys, I am going to go ahead and get us started with a little bit of monologue, and then we'll get right to it. And we're going to talk about, this rise of the incels on the internet, the guys that are claiming they're involuntarily celibate and proud of it and hate women because of their nature. We'll talk about that and the background there. And then we'll talk about what's real out there, and the fact that most men, that kind of contributes to the incels, is most men are actually quite invisible to women. And we're seeing some studies and surveys that actually show that to be the case, coming out of some of these dating surveys and how women respond to the attractiveness of men. So with that, I'll go ahead and get started. So welcome. And I want to talk a little bit here about masculinity before we get started. Guys, I was reading on the internet doing my research here, and it was so fascinating to me because I do a little course on creating masculinity in your own life, and I never really thought about it too much, but it kind of feels like masculinity is just a part of me, but I'm looking on the internet and I thought, it should be really easy to get, 4 or 5 items that could easily define masculinity. So I typed in, what are the top 10 traits of masculinity? And I'm just going to share a little bit of this with you. And then I will share what I had to come up with, because out of the first 6 pages, this is what was presented to me. and I will read this to you. It is the 10 toxic masculine traits and behaviors. And the very first website that came up, gentlemen, was one from Aurora Rand in the UK. And that it had millions and millions of hits. And I'm going to paste it into the chat for you guys. But here's what the top 10 were. And I'm going to bring, the panel, if you really got something after, hang on to afterwards, and then let's discuss the masculinity. But I know you're going to jump in here. So the top 10 was being of toxic masculinity. There was no traits that were listed just masculine. None in a common Google search. The top 10 was being stoic. Number 2 was being promiscuous. Toxic masculine traits. And then number 3 was championing heterosexuality as the unalterable norm. Number 4 was being violent. Number 5 was being dominant. Number 6 was sexual aggression towards women. And next one was not displaying emotion. Number 7 was not being a feminist ally. Then it was risk-taking. Then it was not engaging in household upkeep and caregiving. You want to see what that looks like, gentlemen? Look here. There it is. That's the ones I copied directly here. Very, very interesting. So, take a quick peek at this. This is pretty good. You can look at this and enjoy the first several pages of articles, and you can even go to the American Psychological Association. All of these are repeated in there as 10 as toxic masculinity traits that are being labeled upon you today. That's right. I think this might play into the sexlessness of young men. We'll see. So here's kind of my response, and then I'll get into, I wrote my own 11 traits that I thought should be listed as number 1 for masculinity. So my response, being stoic, being promiscuous, it's in our DNA. Why is that toxic? Championing heterosexuality is the unalterable norm. Yet it is. It's just stated by biology and the laws of nature and the survival of the species. How could it be anything other than the unalterable normalcy? Right? Being violent, yet you must be 100% capable and have at least some indication of said capability in order to just be attracted to the opposite sex and to survive, which is one of the 2 primary drivers for all of us. Being dominant, they say it's toxic, yet it's 100% required for a man, but not 100% of the time. You have to have dominance over yourself. Sexual aggression towards women. What is this? Right now, it's labeled as arbitrary in our social circles, as dependent on feminist culture, and not necessarily the law and congruent language we have now. It's being altered all the time. So how could you possibly respond to that? Not displaying emotion. Well, I'll tell you this much. Displaying vulnerability destroys your relationship as a man with any woman that you should have a relationship with. Not being a feminist ally, what does that mean? Very interesting question. What is not being a feminist ally? Is that not being a Marxist third phase feminist ally, or is that just supporting a woman's right to common decency and respect as any other man or any other person should have? Why would I have to call it out? Risk taking. It's 100% required for a man to secure a mate and to be successful in his life. and then not engaging in household upkeep and caregiving? WTF. Is any of us not a normal adult? Have you not had a pet? Do you not have to survive and keep your shit clean and wired tight? Of course you do. This, I dare anybody to go and Google search this now. The top 10 masculinity traits. Don't even put in toxic. Don't even put in toxic, and you'll have it. So here's mine, and then we'll chop it up a little bit about that before we go into the incel stuff. I'll get everybody's take on masculinity before we even start, because I think it's a crucial element to why a lot of guys are having a bit of unsuccess, right now in the sexual marketplace. It's a bit skewed because we'll get into it. We'll talk about it. I think it's a really interesting conversation, but here's what I view as actual masculinity traits, gentlemen. And then feel free to jump in after this. In fact, honor, strength, self-discipline, mastery, ownership, mentorship, conquest, emotional regulation and durability, foresight, leadership, provisioning and security, and respect. Now we can get into the definitions of those, but that would be my starting list for actual masculinity. Not just what's hanging between your legs, but what goes with that and the burden of performance. This is a start. Gentlemen, let's get started. Let's have a conversation around it. I know Ray's probably chomping at the bit. I know you're lagging a little bit, buddy, but if you got something to add to this, I'd love to hear your thoughts on it.
I think I'm good now. So
I think you are too.
Yeah, I think I got everything fixed.
You guys take on toxic masculinity in that list I just produced?
Well, I mean, from a standpoint, and you and I have talked about this in different forms. But again, it's if you take those things like you listed, like honor, respect, self-respect, all those things, you take that away from a man, you kind of leave him rudderless. He has no way to focus internally on himself and to evaluate himself. And if you take the traits that they say are toxic masculinity, and he only evaluates himself on those, he deconstructs his masculinity and his manhood. And by deconstructing his masculinity and manhood, you see what we have today. We have school shooters that have no emotional control. And yes, they act out in violence because they don't have emotional control. You see that relationships are now 3 to 5 years at the most, because there's no long-term guidance, life guidance for the man.
Yeah.
And he bends to the will of everything else instead of having a foundation to stand up against the struggles. And life is hard. Life is about struggles.
Yeah.
And you need to have, you have to have some kind of background or foundation in order to survive those struggles. And when you don't have that background or foundation, it leaves you without an understanding of yourself to begin with. And when
let me ask this question.
Others.
What is your hypothesis? And this is for the whole group. What is your hypothesis that I would type in on the most powerful information engine we've ever seen? The top 10 traits for masculinity, and I didn't get any of these. Not a single one. Where did that change? Because that was a shock to me. And I imagine even for TJ, who's a little closer to my age and being in the military, I know the military's made a huge shift in the last decade, but some of those still exist there when they're forging their soldiers. It's an important part. What do you guys think? How did we get that shift? Why did it have to do with when we brought everybody into our schools and everybody got a trophy and there were no winners? It's just all the same. Everybody was brought down a level.
Well, let's change it. Okay. When you talk about feminism and you see women acting out as our equals, okay, you go to the what they consider the toxic masculinity traits, and that's what women embrace.
They do.
As equality.
They
Okay.
do. They've taken these traits and used them themselves and consider it feminist qualities.
Right.
One
They've
thing I
become the
want to
patriarchy. Yeah.
one thing I want to throw out here is when you think about like the silent majority, like why did Trump end up winning in 2016? And it's because you don't want to deal with the headache. And a lot of the people that push this narrative of what's toxically masculine, instead of dealing with it, you're not going to change their mind, so you just ignore it. And that's why this type of media gets written instead of fighting against it or doing something different.
Okay, that's a good hypothesis. So has anybody here read Warren Farrell's book on the boy crisis or seen any of those excerpts? Because yes, Laurent, I know you understand, because he doesn't explicitly say so, but he posts the science, and there a lot of the issues with some of these guys, and in particular some of these guys that turned violent that we've seen, like Elliot Rodgers and Jake Davidson recently, they're raised by single mothers, and there's a huge issue that is going on. And remember that Dr. Farrell used to sit on the National Organization of Women's board, so he was all for it, and they cut him loose as soon as he did the science. So there is some issues with men not being present in young men's lives, and now we're seeing huge issues with young men and being sexless. We're going to talk about that in a minute, but so I mean, what is that? Part of his crisis is we're not really teaching young men to be competitive anymore. TJ, when you get your new recruits in, are a large majority of them raised by single moms now?
Well, I don't know that.
How do you deal with it?
Well, I think on the first or second episode, we talked, if I have time built into the encounter, what I'll do is I'll chat with them and just say, hey, how did you grow up? And I'm trying to hint at to have them give me the answer without asking it directly. Mm-hmm. And most of the young soldiers that have less resilience came from single mother homes, unfortunately. Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah.
I wanted to add something also. I don't know if it was looking it up while we were there. I don't know if it was Germaine Greer, but there was a feminist turned anti-feminist. She's probably 75 now. And she was attacked, and I think she had her cat killed, and because she went against the feminist narrative. But she's got about a 5-minute piece. If I can find it, I'll share it with you guys. But what she said, maybe we've discussed this already in earlier episodes, but feminism accomplished what communism could not. It destroyed the masculine drive to defend women and then consequently the nation. So now we have a weaker nation, in my opinion.
Oh, yeah. If you could find that. Oh, boy, that's a good one. I think I've heard excerpts, but that would be really good, because I think that is actually hits the nail right on the head,
And I can also add that I keep a digital copy of that APA guidelines to share with people, because some of the things that are in there, they're so surprising that people think that I'm making it up. I just got into a conversation a couple of weeks ago and had to print off some of the pages and highlight the stuff because my colleague did not believe me that it was in there.
So being in the industry, why do you suppose that was added in?
You mean the APA guidelines?
Yeah. Why was that added in recently?
I don't know. I watched Dr. Sean T. Smith's analysis on it. I don't know the reason why. I can only speculate my own personal reasons, and that's just to weaken men further. Because in there it says, as I'm sure you all know, that things like stoicism, competition, assertiveness, those are all now considered. And what the language that they use specifically, they say traditional masculine ideology. Okay, when you read that in the document, you can just translate that's toxic masculinity, but they can't say that in an academic journal or literature. So they say, it says in there, stoicism, competition, competitiveness, assertiveness, those are now essentially toxic.
Yeah, it's very interesting, because like even stoicism is emotional regulation and mindfulness to some degree. How is that toxic in some ways? And then you look at competition. Competition is very frowned upon in Marxist circles and now feminist circles, but competition is not, it's not a masculine thing. It's a human thing. It's a human thing to compete, to succeed. It's a survival strategy as well. What's our buddy Rich Cooper say? You know, the girls wait at the finish line and they bang the winners. I mean, that is their sexual strategy. The reason men are like we are, the reason we are, at least in my belief, is the reason we have these big muscles. We're taller than the ladies. We express more dominance and survival traits. And the reason we honor these things and use a meritocracy is because they bred us for that. They selected us for that. The women control the birth. They control that. They select. So they selected what was attractive and advantageous to their survival. You think about it. In evolutionary terms, a woman to have a child is one of the most risky things out there. You realize that even some of our closest relatives, like the chimps, when they have a child, the baby can walk and move. It can climb. It's darn near able to be self-sufficient in months versus us, which is years. So it requires a very different strategy and a bonding technique. I mean, you can get into it. Hormones come into play, you know, body count comes into play, and the ability for them to bond, and female orgasm to bond them to us so that we stick with them throughout the weaning process until the child's old enough. I mean, it's a complex, but it makes sense that we are the way we are because of evolutionary pressures placed upon us by the females. I mean, they have 2 X chromosomes. They got one and they got a backup one. We just have one, you know, we have the Y chromosome. So nature experiments with us. You know, if we get messed up, we're out of there. We're the cheap one. We're the ones that get experimented on, right? We're expendable, but the baby carriers are not. So it's kind of interesting that feminism has really pushed to supplant men with the exact same traits. Now, how's that going to work out in a country like China? You know, they're under the influence right now. Laurent, how's that working out in Asia? You guys are feeling the influence of modern feminism, aren't you?
Here we go again. So, oh, you live in Japan, so you must speak perfect Chinese then. Oh man!
People are people. It doesn't matter what country they're in.
So, China. I mean, historically, they had the one-child policy. So what happened is that they favored. There was a mass abortions to basically keep the guys, because guys were more productive to till the land.
Mm-hmm.
And to be in the factories. But actually, at the same time, China has done real equality. Like this is something that is unheard of in the West. Like Chinese women are literally the equal of dudes, and it comes with but it's not like in this weakish, like I'm going to weaken the dudes to be their equal. It's like no, they're equal, and they're very assertive, very aggressive. And it's kind of interesting. So I respect them on that front. It's like it's an equality by default. I want to come back to something that you said before about Kevin Samuels, the late Kevin Samuels, said something that was fascinating to me. He said, "Feminism has accomplished what the slave." And this is verbatim his words. So I don't want to put any interpretation behind it. But he said. Feminism has accomplished in 2 generations what the slave masters has failed in 2 centuries. Yeah. The destruction of the family. So as far as China is concerned, yes, there's a deficit of dudes, and they import Chinese ethnic ladies from overseas. And yeah, there is a deficit. And even I can speak for my own church. Like I live in Japan, and there's an immense contingent of dudes who are completely invisible to women. And it's a brutal game. It's a brutal game for a lot of guys. Like,
and what I was getting at with China also is, you know, they're under tremendous pressure, and they know it, and it leaks out occasionally because there's 44 million more men than women.
One thing that is interesting. For instance, we know a bunch of Chinese people who live in Japan, and one of them is like, "Oh yeah, you don't have an apartment? Well, you're not a marriage candidate." Like literally, the dowry is the burden of performances on the dude. Like, what? You don't have an apartment in Shanghai? How dare you?
Yeah. They're the selectors, right?
Like, whoa. Yeah. That's big brutal. So,
I can
Yeah,
only
well,
imagine. That's tremendous. When male female ratios become unbalanced, things turn into a problem. Now, the reason I was driving at that for the conversation is let's step back. You know, most of our history, we've been polygamous. You know, one man would be successful. He would mate with many women, you know, even in the feudal times. And men had to compete, and they basically, you know, treated women as very valuable. You know, you all know the war brides scenario where my ancestors would travel just to capture women because there's too many men. So when there's too many men, things become an issue, and the men compete, and they'll compete with violence, you know, because that's what men do. That's what we have evolved to do through the sexual selection process. And in the Renaissance, you know, the church really grabbed onto the, you know, for every man there is a soulmate. There's the one man, one woman thing, and it really grew out of that and really benefited society for a long time. You know, every man was basically in society. There's always a woman for you. You know, there is one, and that seems to have, at least on the surface level in history, have been very obvious. People talked about it. They talked about marriage as a contract, not out of the love, although romantic love did come out of the Renaissance, but it wasn't as prevalent. And then it really took off in the last century. And we got the one-itises that we have now, the Disney fantasy. And it's probably not reality, but there was some usefulness for a while. And now we see a shift where, yeah, we basically got 50% women and we got 50% men, but we're seeing a real rise in sexlessness, at least reported sexlessness in young men. You know, I have the one picture of sexlessness. I'll put it up. We can talk about it a little bit, but here it is.
I actually think that it's a feature. I think
Okay.
you have a difference too between different societies, right? You actually, in order to have a fairly stable society, you have to have monogamy. This and you see the only industrialized societies historically were in the Far East, and they had to catch up in Europe.
Yeah.
Both of which practiced monogamy largely, now although not exclusively.
Not exclusively, but yeah, absolutely.
When you have, in order to, if you look at examples of polygamous societies, they're not stable societies. and why not? Because you have these guys who are left over, who are their only shot is to risk violence in order
you end
to
up with an
establish.
imbalance, right?
So
sexual frustration. You're right, Sam. Absolutely. There's huge benefits to that.
English Empire. I mean, England. English food, English weather, English women. 3 reasons to build an empire.
That's actually pretty funny. Where's our British brothers? So here's just a real quick one. You know, Sam, here is the rated from 1989 to 2018. This is the reported sex in the last year, and or never any sex, and you can just see, you know, some of that. So monthly sex was reported. You know, there's a breakdown of men and women. Oh, I didn't capture the men and women part, but essentially, you know, men and women are split now, and it has gone way high for the men. So why would that be in the last 10 years? It's interesting because we don't have a separation in the population. We don't have, say, 60% women or 40% women now, so the men aren't getting sex that way. It just seems to be that they're undesirable. So, you know, I pulled up the attractiveness study from was it Tinder? Yeah, it's Tinder. It's either Tinder or one of those, where male attractiveness versus female attractiveness, this is the only thing that correlates with it right now.
Yeah.
And this shows that, I mean, this is a huge amount of female advantage in the dating market online. And I think this kind of correlates in real life too, when it's face to face. And what I'm trying to say is that it shows here, what, 80 to 100% find just this small percentage is attractive, and the rest get screened out.
Well, yeah,
So that's female hypergamy at play right there.
And
Right?
that is another mathematical representation of the Pareto distribution right there.
It
And
is.
I will tell you, it's amazing how many people, when I talk to them about this math,
Mhm.
they just absolutely are resistant to it. They're no. Men are the objectifying ones. No,
Mm.
not really. We're pretty fair.
I think some of that's projection too. I see that all the time. I think you see that on like Fresh and Fit, where they ask the women how many of the men currently are having sex that are between 18 and 30. We know that a third of them are not,
But-
or virgins, and they think it's the same rate that they have sex.
Look at this. Look at where this is coming from. This is on Reddit. This is a guy. This is some basement dweller who's like, "Hey, don't even try, so I have a chance." That's why he's posting it.
I know. I figure you get a charge out of this one. It's just a clip though, but
I'm curious. I'm curious on this. It says 58% are brain damaged. Where does that come from?
it says down here some article. So when they ask the questions,
What does that
they
mean?
let them speak. It was donmatch.com and date hookup.
What does that mean? Brain damaged. That means
I just
different to me.
So
This
it's
is based
interesting
off
'cause
of-
I didn't go so far into it, but the interesting part of this article when I was looking was that there was some interesting statistics I didn't bring up that, when men have a higher IQ, they have a higher number of sexual partners. They have a higher probability of mating. When women have a higher IQ, their ability to attract mates goes down in general. And found that kind of interesting. Why would that be? I don't know.
because they're competitive.
Yeah, and maybe men don't really care that any hole's the goal, right? I don't know.
I can,
Yeah,
I
man.
can,
But
I can
modern
speak for
women find that the intelligence is number one, right, for attractiveness, but that's not what men are finding.
I can speak for experience here. Agreeableness. Agreeableness, like because women naturally compete in this case, like, oh, I'm more intelligent, I'm better than you, da da da. And you know what? Like, you don't want to have another dude at the dinner table, or you don't want to have another dude in bed. So agreeableness, like lack of agreeableness.
Absolutely. They always want it. If you're smart and they feel like they could be even in your ballpark, they want to show how smart they are. And it's like, I don't care. Why would I? And they make for bad men too. They have to kind of one up you.
Interesting. So that's the big five personality traits. And I think this comes into play when you start looking at some of these guys that are self-proclaimed incels. The big five is openness, which is, it involves the different facets of your personality, which is active imagination, aesthetic sensitivity, attentive to feelings of yourself and others, preference for variety, intellectual curiosity. That's openness. Conscientiousness is the personality trait of essentially being careful or diligent, and the desire to do tasks well, and you take your obligations to others seriously. Extroversion is a trait to experience, effects including anger, self-consciousness, irritability, emotional instability, and depression. To experience the ability. Okay, I got that one wrong. What is extroversion? Extroversion is the trait, disposition to experience negative effects including anger, anxiety, self-consciousness, irritability, and emotional instability socially. So I took that right out of one of TJ Hunter's books when they talk about the big five. So whatever that means, to me, it means that you're willing to take somewhat of the risk to be out there socially. Extroversion. Agreeableness is the trait, disposition to experience ability to get along with people. Disagreeable. Men tend to be more disagreeable, right? And we are not willing to accept certain circumstances in our life, so we're disagreeable with that. And I think that's one of the reasons why we tend to be more successful when we're asking for raises. That was part of that study on wage equality, right?
Yeah,
I'd like to make a.
I may again. So something occurred to me while we were all talking about this and the traits, and I thought, wait a minute, this competition thing and getting rid of it, like that goes back 3.5 billion years when bacteria are fighting for resources. So when these people are fiddling around with saying no more competitiveness, it's no stinking wonder they want to go after that, because that's the primal attribute for survival.
Yeah.
And then when we were talking about all these personality traits, I'm like, if you are let's just anthropomorphize for a second. If you're an agreeable bacteria in the primordial soup, you ain't gonna live. Everything about competition and gathering and gaining more resources and reproducing means you have to be disagreeable.
Yeah. Yeah, because you got to be willing to share your resource, and that's agreeableness, right? And if you share too much, you won't have enough for yourself. You might have to. I guess sometimes I'm agreeable, sometimes I'm disagreeable. It just depends.
I think there's both, because in like a hierarchy of an in-group of men or a tribe, you got to be able to cooperate. You have to have a clear hierarchy to do so.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to be able to say, okay, this person's better. This guy's better at this. He's a more charismatic leader, whatever. We're gonna listen to him. And I don't think that's something that women do in their groups.
So let me ask a question. What is the one thing when a group of men get together happens?
Beer.
A lot of ball
measuring contest.
Huh?
A lot of ball busting, and that's how we bond. We're gonna bond through kind of putting each other through trials.
And what does that bonding do?
It allows everyone to move in one direction for one goal.
Right.
Benefits the tribe.
So what happens when you take young men, large groups of young men, and you take that structure away from them? That's what the problem is.
Yeah. They become aimless.
But if I were an outsider who wanted to weaken a society, right, what I would do is I would find the more agreeable members of society, or those men who couldn't compete, and I would, try to make them feel more powerful by destroying the more protective, more security-minded, more stoic men, and having their reputations destroyed, or having other, them be raised up not to be those men or to be feminized.
So, but look at it from a different perspective. Look at ancient times. What was the way they learned? What was the way the Ottomans controlled society? They killed the warriors, and they assimilated the ones that couldn't fight or wouldn't fight.
Mm.
Okay, the French did it. The Nazis tried to do it.
Mm-hmm.
They did it in Russia. It's by taking away leaders. Okay. And that's how they destroyed the family structure. They took away the leaders.
It's
Yeah,
true,
I think
but
that's somewhat happening to us, actually, Wraith.
Yeah, it is what's happening to us.
I think it's worse in a way, though, because the Ottomans, they had their janissaries, right? They had the guys, and they would have them, instead of serving Serbia or Bulgaria, they would say, hey, you're going to become Muslim. We're going to become the leaders, and you're going to serve us. I think that this is worse than that in a way, because you're taking the men and you're destroying them. You're not even making them serve, your your ends. It's more insidious.
I think feminism is making men serve their ends. But here's the problem. Okay, by taking away male leadership from families and from groups, and I mean just as easy as saying, okay, not that I'm a big Boy Scout fan, but telling the Boy Scouts, you have to let women in. But by removing those male spaces in the family, in society, you've done that. You've done the same thing the Ottomans did. All right. And now they're saying, okay, now you have to either assimilate. I mean, it's like the Borg. It's a Star Trek uses as an example. You either assimilate or you die.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we're telling these young men today. The problem is as TJ said, and primordially, we have, as men, certain survival responsibilities. And our survival responsibilities are for the whole species, not just the male species. And women have tried to make it so that in order to survive, you have to take the female imperative through feminism in order to survive. Well, the problem is you have a lot of young, messed up young men who are thinking emotionally, and they've never been taught to think rationally about the decisions and stuff that they want to make. They're dealing 100% from emotions.
Why do you think that is? Because they become part of what they're around. From the time they're born, they're put in daycare with women. They go to school with women. They have no masculine roles. So what's going to happen to them? They have to supplicate and seek women's approval, or they get in trouble, or they're bad. So it's not like in the old days when men got together and the boys grew up and they worked on the farm or they worked in the family business. They got to know what it was like to be a man, to have masculine traits, to have integrity, to have honor, to stand up for yourself and your family. They don't learn that from women. They learn that from men. And kids now, and for a long time, have been being raised up in daycares with women workers. How many men work in daycares? Probably not too many. And then in schools, the teachers are all women. So through their formative years, during the impression years till 7 and after, they have to seek approval of women, or they get in trouble. They're considered bad.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Mark, I mean, you're old enough to remember when men did run daycares, and then they had those big scares about there were witches and Satanists and all that stuff, and the risk was tremendously high for men to be involved with any children anymore.
Yeah, it's not worth the risk.
Coaching perspective, it's highly risky for a normal man to show any sort of leadership or discipline around children anymore, because there has been some issues with abuse for sure, and those are broadcast widely. And now we kind of well, that's everywhere, so men are definitely not well received in those areas for sure.
Well, and I want to add something to what Mark was saying. If the child is young enough, seeking that female approval can be emotionally interpreted as like death if you don't get that approval.
Exactly.
Well, I'm going to go a little step further and say I don't think daycares in general are should be. I don't think there should be a daycare. I think they should be with their mother until the age of like 5-ish, right? Wasn't the Spartans?
Yep.
They were with their mother until 5, and then they were sent to warrior training about after then. I think that's kind
Pretty
of
much, yeah.
That's the story anyway. Yeah.
No, I mean, I would agree. They're better off with their mother and their father. That's really ideal, for forming a child. I mean, without a doubt.
I'm me, I don't like to beat up on women because I think, it's not a solution to the problem.
It is not.
Okay. And I think the solution to the problem is for men to step up and take responsibility for their kids.
100%.
We see more and more of that not happening.
Yeah. So, I mean, anybody can look about this incel problem. Let's talk about these shooters because, at least the one, and now we're seeing the other one recently. I mentioned the name earlier. That was the Elliot Rogers here in California. He did a manifesto and called himself an incel. And that's where it came from. He was forced out of the market. Women did not pay attention to him. He deserved it. And he went on a shooting spree and targeted women. That was the Elliot Rogers. Do you guys remember that? He did that in Santa Barbara, I think 2014. That started this whole thing. And now you're seeing Reddit groups, I just put one up there about, the sexlessness and how women view men as unattractive. I think that's always been there. It's always been there, but it might be exacerbated in the fact that the majority of women have access to social media. So their filters for hypergamy are somewhat skewed into an unrealistic place for their local sexual marketplace. That might be a part of it, but
we talked about that last week. It's the thirst. It's it's the thirst that these young men are generating for themselves.
So how do we solve that with them as an older group of men? Because for me, and for all of you here, I don't see a single guy that has trouble attracting the opposite sex in any way, shape, or form. But you and I have all been on calls with guys that really do struggle with it. And it seems like there's more and more of them that have a lack of social awareness and congruency when they're communicating. We've seen it.
Well, and that's, and I'm going to be honest with you, that's where the red pill fails.
It does.
Okay. Because we sit there and we make these young men aware, but we don't give them solutions to solve the problem.
Mm-hmm. And that's what I want to do here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
So on the solution node, this will be a generalized solution, but Thor, in your list, you had mentorship. And I think this applies for masculinity and excellent femininity as well. In order to be an excellent mentor, you yourself have had to gone through enormous struggle and come out the other end stronger and more intelligent, more creative. So to become an excellent mentor, I think is one of and I'm trying to be fair here, like Rafe was saying, for young women, you have to have excellent femininity that know how to mentor young women to be excellent older women, just like we have to get enough good mentorship for men to encourage and lead younger men. But I think that's one of the highest demonstrations of being either an excellent man or woman.
So let me ask you a question, TJ.
Yes.
What happens if we turn the world around?
I don't know.
What happens if we come up and we make every young man, or say 90% of the young men, excellent men?
It's a great question. I mean, it would be an unrecognizable universe to me, I think.
And then these women that haven't had the opportunity to be taught how to be excellent women would be on the outside looking in.
I see. So without the other piece, without the excellent mentorship in the femininity realm,
Right.
Oh gosh, that would be a really, really chaotic world, and it would be. I think it would be just as bad as it is now, if not worse.
So, and that's the point. From a standpoint of, I think feminism is not the majority of society. I mean, you have probably just 60% of women that aren't feminists or don't think they're feminist. Okay. Now, I mean, my girlfriend, when she talks, sometimes she says stuff, and I said, and I'll tell her, yeah, that's not right. And this is why it's not right. Because she's been taught that her whole life.
Yeah.
Okay. But as you start trying to develop a relationship, and she knows very well that the relationship is based on my needs. Okay. And her needs. But primarily, I'm the one that does 90% of the providing. So she understands that, I need to be cared for. And that's what women aren't teaching these young men. The difference between, first off, being dominant and domineering. And there's a difference.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. They're not teaching them to, that when you take a woman into your life, you take responsibility for her, as well as she takes responsibility for you. Now, that's the equality in a relationship. You both have responsibility to the relationship. But, when people, I tell this to my own kids, no relationship is 50-50 at any one time. And I have yet to find a relationship that's 50-50 at the end of when both of them pass away. Someone is always giving more. It just depends on what they're giving. So there's no 50-50. There's no equality. There's an understanding of needs for both parties, and there's the other person fulfilling that requirement.
Well, there's a medical metaphor, that I use to kind of explain that. Yeah, I don't think there is a 50-50. It's like, say the liver and the pancreas, they're like talking to each other. Hey, pancreas, how you doing over there? I'm the liver. Can I help you be a better pancreas cell? And then so it'll send nutrients and chemical markers and things to help that pancreas stay a good, healthy pancreas cell. And then the pancreas will say, hey, liver cell, do you need? And I mean, I think you get the metaphor that they're constantly talking to each other and trying to enhance that other's function to the highest level possible. And that's a healthy functioning organism. And that's my medical metaphor for a healthy functioning society.
Right. And I agree with you. But like I said, the whole point I wanted to make when I first made the first statement is I don't like beat up women, because I think we as men are solely responsible for the state of the world today, because we've given up so much responsibility.
Well, I'm sorry, Rafe, go ahead.
Well, no, and I just say, and we've walked away from that responsibility.
Well, and we were talking about feminism. Well, and not many women actually identify, but Allie just graduated, and so having been there through her extra year when she went through anthropology, I think that you don't even have to call it feminism anymore. It's just kind of the state of society where some of those feminist indoctrination mentalities, they're just the standard norm now. Like, they don't even need to teach it.
Right.
Yeah, I think you guys are right. You're onto something here. I think with this group of young men that are calling themselves incels and and are kind of jumping on this bandwagon. In a way, it's a victim mindset, but it's also kind of, you know, a Pavlovian response. I'm not responsible. I'm not, and it's a give up thing, you know,
Victim.
and they've
It's-
fallen right into, you know, one of the things that, you know, modern feminism and our modern media really, really need. And they become the bad guy, so much so that they are talking about listing them as a terrorist radical organization, loose organization right now. I don't know if you've looked up INCEL. I don't believe in it. I think it's ridiculous. I think it's just guys having a Pavlovian victim response to not being sexually successful because they have limited their abilities as men. They're very feminized. There's lots of give up, you know, and they're using excuses, but they are being targeted by modern media and even the, I forget which organization it was brought up in Congress. I think somebody was talking. I mean, obviously no laws yet, but they're talking about, you know, defining them as a radical terrorist organization. So
Yeah, but
yeah, you want to jump in?
legislation is downstream of culture.
Mm-hmm. It is.
Everyone's a terrorist organization that's against the current
But it's
government.
true because they sensationalize it. Is it a problem? Well, it is. I would imagine it's a problem for the guys calling themselves incels. You know?
I wanted to make a point. I think there's two things when we talk about what's causing it. One of them is birth control, hormonal birth control. Beforehand, women would definitely get pregnant. Often they'd have the kid at like and they'd be like they'd get sent off to a home to have the kid, and then the kid would be raised by the grandparents, or that still would happen, but it was much more of a shame and much more of a natural consequence of a woman having sex outside of wedlock. So while there was obviously the hypergamous urge to mate up and so on, actually executing that strategy, you'd have to either make a guy think that he was the father of that kid. So if daddy didn't want to stick around, or you'd have to marry early. And when they had to marry early, obviously that's a 1-to-1, right? Because they had to marry one guy. So more guys would have a more even distribution of sex, at least one sexual partner, right?
Yep.
So that would be one thing. But the other thing is too is that if you think about fundamentally from a historical standpoint, from all cultures, you have asceticism, right? You have these guys who go off and become monks, or go off and live in the woods and build stuff. And you have this cast of men who, for whatever reason, are not attractive or are not mentally fit enough, and they go off and they build productive things. And this is actually a recognized caste in society, or recognized purpose. We don't have that anymore.
No, we don't. No.
There's no outlet for this. So those two things that when you talk about the causes come to mind.
No, we don't have that. We don't have rites of passage anymore to get these guys over the hump and get them some self-confidence. You know, I wanted to ask a medical question because you reminded me something when you talked about hormonal birth control, how it might be loosely related to this, particularly today when we're seeing monogamous relationships, but we're seeing a lot more serialized monogamy, rapid serialized monogamy. And I can't remember who I was listening to. They had an article up and they had a study on hormonal birth control where couples would be married, and when the couple or when the woman came off her hormonal birth control, you know, of course they had a little lesser sex drive, but then they'd come off to get pregnant, and there was a component of the birth control, and women would be repulsed by the smell of their mate when they came off of birth control. This is a real deal. And it would stress. You've seen that or heard that? That's a pretty strange thing when you realize that the hormones are actually affecting the thought and attraction process to an incredible degree. Now, if I put my tinfoil hat on, you know, we all know that men's testosterone has been driven down 45% in the last 50 years. You realize that women's has too? And it's just as important in women, testosterone. Now, the ratios are different, but it's just as important. So anyway, thought I would throw that out there. Have you heard that medically, TJ?
No, I have heard
birth control affecting, you know, how a person views their mate.
Well, not that specific study. I mean, I believe it exists, but I have to be really careful when
Yeah.
it comes, talking about because if I don't know the data,
That's fine.
all I know is that yes, that birth control, it can and does affect how attractive or attracted people are, that women are to other men, depending on what type of birth control.
Yeah, I don't think that's well understood, is it?
Well, okay, now I'll put on my tinfoil hat.
Right.
I don't think they want to understand it.
Ah,
It's kind of like the data that we brought up earlier, right? The 80-20, that 80% of women want the top 20%. That's only what, 6 or 7 years old, and people still resist it. I would imagine if they put a lot of money and did like a double-blind randomized controlled trial, multi-centered and multi-demographic, that they would not like the answers.
I think you're right. And that the Pareto curve it's almost an immutable law, because I mean, when you hear us talk about, the exceptions don't invalidate the rule. I mean, you can look at this in almost every aspect of life and realize that if you're playing probabilities, you want to stay within that Pareto curve, because your outcomes are always much better in the long run. But us humans sit there and think, you know what? I'm going to put that money in the lottery because I know a person that won, and all they need is that 7.5 to 10% to say they're the exception. And then every human within the curve says, I'm the exception. I believe I'm the exception. Let's go. And that's how casinos win all the money, right? Is because every one of us cannot help but think we're the exception. And the reality is we're absolutely not, but we think we are. This is so well expressed when you see the gals that are older hitting the wall, right? Close to 40. And
dude, don't even get me started. I went out with a buddy of mine, a client last night, and I went to go ahead and show him, because there was a very attractive older woman that came into the bar, and pulled her over, and I said to her, like, you want to make some friends? Like, come over a seat. And she ended up moving and becoming a part of her group. And this woman was insufferable. And she thought she was hot shit. And she was 51 years old, thinking that, I don't need no man. I only deserve the best. It is crazy how they think about it that way.
The exception.
Yeah.
Yep.
Thor, for your audience, I just want to flesh out that Pareto distribution. It doesn't apply just to living organisms. Like if you take a shot of like the Hubble Deep Field and look at, say 10,000 galaxies, you take the square root of that, about 100 of those galaxies are producing 50% of the energy. And then you take the square root of the square root, that's where you get the 75 to 80%. So, and that applies to stars. If you take, like, say 10,000 trees in the Amazon jungle, about 100 of them are going to be producing about 50% of the leaves and the fruit and that. So it's not just life; it's everywhere in the universe.
It's a law. It's a standard distribution. It's standard distribution model. It's pretty amazing.
But I don't think
our brains
don't changed.
Our brains don't work around that real well.
Nope.
I don't think it's changed. I think it's always been 80-20.
I agree.
Yeah,
I agree. I think it's more visible to us because we have this amazing communication system that gives the world at our fingertips here. And so we think we're the exception worldwide, and we're looking at the top 0.01% of the people in the world and saying, oh, yeah, I could have that. I could do that. I think this is a big thing.
Well, and I think most men in that 80% could have sex if they would do something with themselves.
Or if they lower their standards. Look at Elliot Rodgers, right? Like he was talking about. That's just funny to me. I think this is a big part of it as well. Is that, I mean, maybe 80% of women are going after 20% of men, but it's not like those 20% are the only ones, fucking. I wouldn't say, like there's. People. Elliot Rodgers, if you read through his manifesto, which I don't suggest you do, but he did say that he was going after pretty blonde chicks, and he was a sort of short, kind of awkward, kind of mixed race, like rich kid. He wasn't like, he could have very easily, and also the other thing that this is also pertinent is that he never approached any women. He never actually tried. If you read through. He never made any approaches. He didn't even know if he was not a success or not, because he never even tried. He just assumed, I think, because of his, I guess, his upbringing or something wrong with his head, that women would just walk up to him.
It's funny. It's funny that you say that, and I also think it's funny that there's somebody in the chat whose name is Explosive Diarrhea, because one of the things that I have shown men, especially when I go out in public with them, I have approached women and said, "I have diarrhea," as my opening line, and gotten laid. So you can literally do anything, and I just don't understand why people don't try.
So talk to us a little bit about the invisibility problem that a lot of the guys are facing.
Absolutely, yeah. So I think it comes back to when we were talking about hypergamy and thinking about Rolo and the global sexual marketplace. Essentially, now instead of everything being within your tribe, it's across the world. So you can go ahead and post stuff. I know we talked about it before, but there's female dating coaches that go ahead and put out the same information that we would do. Whether their information is right or wrong is irrelevant, but they'll get thousands of likes on it, and they'll get all the money. They can post pictures and they'll get hundreds, thousands of likes, whereas men do not. And I think the globalization is why so many men are invisible to women, because they have a much broader net to cast now than they used to have.
Well, Hutz, doesn't Rolo call that unfettered hypergamy?
I'm not quite sure.
Yeah, I think he calls it unfettered hypergamy.
I still blame men, because, like I said, there's not a day that I can't walk into Walmart or any other store, talk to a woman, and have her develop some kind of attraction.
But what do we do?
I don't think Hudz is not blaming the men. I think that their nature is to reach out and cast that wide net, because they're not successful, right?
Just wondering what we do. Like, I'm just kind of framing the issue, and that's what I think the issue is, because we got to start with the issue before we get to a solution. I think that's the problem, quite honestly.
But I think men want to be invisible.
We have to mentor the men that don't know what to do.
Wraith, I kind of agree with you, and I agree for the reason that Hud stated. I think, yeah, they're if you're exceptionally good looking, like if you're some Adonis, you'll get female attention for sure, or if you're just in that localized sexual marketplace, like if I'm like in the Philippines, being 6 foot tall and looking different, that'll definitely have an effect, right? But Hud's is making the point that men do, and your point too, that men do want to be invisible because they don't approach. They don't even make themselves visible.
I mean, I'm a 63-year-old fat guy, so it's not like,
Well, let's go to biology again, right? So the mammalian brain develops two things: fight or flight. So, yeah, you can either freeze and not move and avoid the predator. I'm not trying to say that women are predators, but that could be a survival instinct. Just stand still, go invisible, and then I won't get hurt.
I think you both have really good points, because the communication strategies between men and women have changed in the last decade. I can tell you just by talking to people, and I enjoy talking to people. I am living the dream and asking people how they live the dream. By and large, when I observe other people, especially young men and women, it seems to be a little more debative as a communication style than it used to be. Maybe I'm just getting old and senile.
I can agree but disagree too. Because, I mean, what's one of the first things I tell young men when I'm coaching them and we get the money straightened out, we get all the mindset straightened out. The first thing I tell them is, I don't care where you go, find someone to talk to. And if it starts with the men, get comfortable talking to strangers. Just walk up to a guy and say, and have a conversation with a guy. And then, 2 or 3 weeks later, I'll say, now approach a female with no intention of dating or anything like that. It's just getting them to be able to communicate. And that's one of the problems. I mean, you've sat there, you've worked in these groups. These young men can't communicate. They can't even communicate to us half the time. I mean, how many times have you sit in a consult trying to pull information out of them?
Oh, don't even get me started, Rick. I literally was on a call with somebody the other day, and it was pulling teeth, and then at the end of it, you don't get anywhere. Right. And it's like, what? Like, why are you here? Why are you talking? It just doesn't make any sense. I don't get why we don't want to improve. That's the thing that just baffles me.
Well, it's I mean, medically speaking, it's the hypothalamus, because the hypothalamus moves us away from anything that's uncomfortable. It's just survival. And so now that we live in a society of absolute convenience, we can conveniently avoid anything uncomfortable. And then we
And
don't-
comfort. Yeah.
That is true.
The fear response is the same, whether it's a predator, a tiger, or a girl that you're afraid to approach. It's still the same
Yes.
fear
Right.
response, the same feeling.
Sorry.
And you have to have courage to step through that. And as far as the solution goes, the only thing I know is you have to mentor these young men, but they have to have the desire to be mentored. And many of them, I've been told, and I've learned through my sons, that are sitting behind computers, masturbating to porn. So their desire to actually approach goes down because they get some type of secondary satisfaction from that. Take one of those young men, lock him up so he can't masturbate, and he'll grow a desire to go confront and face the predator, the woman. And I agree, women aren't predators. I'm just saying as an example. So, but
You hit the nail on the head. I think that's a huge reason why that is. Humongous reason. As I think when you have a direct problem of not being able to get a sexual release, and you're like, okay, as a man, if that's not being satisfied, you don't even have a facsimile for that. It's like, okay, well, I better do something. Your body won't let you not.
That's right. And so everybody knows that the thing from Conan, Nietzsche's quote, that which does not kill you makes us stronger. Well, what they don't tell you, what Nietzsche doesn't tell you, is there's a lot of stuff that'll kill you.
Yeah, exactly. Now,
Schopenhauer, not Nietzsche. Schopenhauer.
Schopenhauer.
Yeah.
Thank you. I did not know that.
Explosive diarrhea. Lots of men, young guys lack purpose. One of the masculine traits that I think need to be passed on when we are doing our mentorship is foresight, guys. You know what foresight means? It's the ability to predict the action or predicting of what will happen or be needed in the future. So if you're a young guy and you're losing hope, you need to be able to have some foresight. I believe that is a masculine trait exclusively in many ways, because that's how we built our civilizations, to predict that need. And what is a big need that these young men have? The need to fulfill their sexual strategy, right? And find mates. You can prepare for that. There's a lot of guys on here that know how to do it. Laurent, did you want to jump in on the Schopenhauer thing?
You all know hashish, right? Like cannabis, right? You know where it comes from? It comes from Hashishim. Hashishim was a sect was a medieval sect in the Middle East, and the practice was they had a young man smoke, and they had chicks, and then they would deprive them of the chicks, and they would deprive them of those pleasures, and say, "Go out and kill somebody." You're like, "Okay, where's it? Give me a knife. Let's go." It's basically at least the sublimation of it can trigger a lot of violence in dudes. And you look at a lot of the suicide bombers, you look at a lot of the mass shooting. All these guys, the avenue when there's no sexual release, when there's no connection, is violence. So, and another thing that you mentioned, I think that we have the young people have the wrong software, and we conflate process versus outcome. So you always talk about, like, we all talk about, go out and approach people. If we identify I've been rejected with I am wrong, then of course we're gonna recall, retweet, video game, porn, yada yada. And whereas if it's just process, when you shut down in a video game, you don't think, I'm a bad person. So actually, getting people to have the right software, which is, hey, this is something you have to do. When you go to the dojo and you get slapped in the face, well, you just got slapped in the face. You pick yourself back up, and you go out and do it in a better time. So, but the difficulty that probably is important is that how do we get the message to these guys when they've been wrong and when their identity has been challenged all the time? So that's my question to you, to the panel, gentlemen, to the wiser man.
Okay. I think coaching opportunity is the best, particularly if you're coaching young men in sports. You can still do that. I love the fact that some young men are still involved in martial arts, particularly some of the close contact competition like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, Muay Thai, boxing. Those are excellent avenues to actually get to know those folks and build that hierarchy of masculinity that they actually need to succeed. That has been proven successful over and over again. What TJ does with his soldiers is almost identical, but in kind of a accelerated format. He gets them a little later in life than when they're teens, but it's never too early to start. Mamas are going to attack their boys, but they need to go with their dads. They need to be grabbed and taken with their dads and shown the ways of the world, because they have a burden of performance to perform. They don't have an express value other than they are raw materials at that point. Love them to death, but the women are valuable because they produce babies. The men,
Yes.
not so much. So we have to forge them and make them, steel sharpens steel. So we have to take them, to the sharpening stone.
And Thor, I want to augment that, because it's rewarding but disheartening, because the handful of young men that will come in to my office after hours and just seek the mentoring, they're so thirsty and hungry and in need of it. And I'm just, where are the rest of them? But the ones that do spend the time, like, my heart goes out to them, and I actually get a sense of purpose out of mentoring them. And I'm like, gosh. And I know Jordan Peterson's talked a lot about that too, how sad it is that just the tiniest bit of encouragement, how far it goes. Gentlemen, I have to get going. I got some other obligations. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me.
We're going to wrap up, but thanks, TJ. Where can we find you, man? You want to plug your?
Don't have any.
All right.
Online presence. I'm working on it.
All right, buddy. We'll see you next week, man. Thank you so much for jumping in on this topic.
You should at least plug your wife.
Yeah, good.
She has some really good information out there.
Okay, I'll plug her. So my wife's channel is Real Femme Sapien. So you can check her out at Real Femme Sapien, and please check out her channel and give her a subscribe. Bye-bye.
I have her links in our description already.
Yeah, realfemsapien.com too. It's a great website. You should go there.
Yep.
Oh, thanks, Sam.
Thanks, TJ.
Gentlemen, take care.
Nice. So now the rest of you get to answer the question. What do we do as a tribe? I think we have to become a tribe, and we're already forming those tribes to do it. At least virtually, there are several men's outlets such as the DragonShip, right? My monthly mastermind or others. You definitely. Are you laughing at me? Or are you laughing at your kids there, Lauren?
I'm laughing at my kid. I'm laughing at my kid.
But there are men's groups that are exclusively designed for young men and even older men that find themselves frustrated with some of the issues that have entered their life. And they don't have to be. They can take responsibility. They can do a frame statement like Wraith does. And so these groups are out there. You have to seek them out yourself. We can't come and get you. But if you're watching this and you need to, all the contact information are in the description. If you need to change some things and become successful, you want to be, approaching a billionaire in a few years, well, you better talk to Laurent, because he's well ahead of us on that path, And there's guys here that do amazing things you wouldn't even believe if I broadcasted here. But the idea behind this group and other groups is that we are going to take those men that want to be raised up with us, in success in life. A rising tide lifts all boats, and that's what we do here at the DragonShip. So let's answer that question that was posed to us from Lauren. Who wants to go?
I'm ready to go. You want to start, Sam?
Yeah, sure. No, I think definitely forming tribes is absolutely imperative, whether that be along, ethnic lines, geographical, but more over in this age of information, it's very easy to find people who have a similar mindset. And you can join any one of these interlocking communities of ours and find that. But also, I wanted to really shout out Red Pill Thor here. And this is something that maybe also with Wraith, finding a trades group or a guild in a way is really big for that. Because you can go out there and find some badass like Red Pill Thor. It's like, I want to learn how to make money and also learn this skill set, but also I'm going to learn a couple things about life and picking up a trade by working with one of these guys, or figuring out what you even could do by working with a guy like Wraith. Well, you'll automatically find yourself under some mentorship pretty quickly. So if you are a younger man who's still looking for direction being one of the things that you're going to need in order to attract a woman in the first place, you got to have a path that you're inviting her to come along on, right? So definitely would plug talking to Red Pill Thor and or Wraith and any of these guys, really.
Beautiful. What I was going to say here, when it comes to all of this, you need to find what resonates with you. So all of these guys here are part of different groups. You got the DragonShip. I have a group called First Class. I know that Sam does some development stuff, and Wraith does a lot of different things when it comes to helping men just, completely improve in their lives. And Laurent is a part of the Plunder, the absolute fantastic course that we are doing right now. He is the money genius, trading genius. And so you got to find what you vibe with. When you go out there and you consume content, you got to be thinking about, okay, like, who do I resonate with? I know initially I thought MLD was a dick. I'll be completely honest. Every time I watched him on Rule Zero, I was like, who is this guy? But then I got to know him more. And then I got involved in his group. And once I got involved in his group, boom, that's how I met all these people. And I just had to wait until I felt the time was right and made sure that I'm resonating with the right person. So when you consume content like this, look around, essentially shop around, but make sure that when you resonate with somebody, you make action on it instead of waiting for somebody to do action for you.
Awesome. Shout out to MLD. Skull. Right, you got something to add there? Question?
I think from my standpoint, where do we start? I think it's by starting off. We start by offering solutions.
Yep.
And wait. And I'm going to say something about content. Way too much red pill content is about theory with no solutions. It's great to have the theory, guys, but you got to start developing yourself with either through self-evaluation, self-study, but you've got to start coming up with solutions for yourself. If not, you just sit at home and you think, I'm never going to be these guys. And that you make it unreachable for yourself. And every one of these guys here, and myself included, could tell you that we struggled through similar things, if not some of the things that you struggled through. Maybe not to the extent that you're at right now. But we all had to come up with solutions for ourselves. And I was blessed with mentors during my life that helped me find those solutions. I know THOR was. And if you don't do something, you're going to suffer through the status quo. That's just the way it is. And blaming women, blaming hypergamy, and everything that you can blame isn't a solution. It's just blaming. And when you blame something enough, you become a victim of it. Quit being a victim and start doing something with your life. Now, they talk about the frame statement. If you just email me or hit me up on Telegram, I will send you the slideshow. It doesn't cost you anything. And I'll tell you the way I work with guys. If I'm talking to them one-on-one, either video or in person, I charge you. If I'm talking to you on Telegram, if I'm talking to you on Facebook, or if I'm talking to you through email, I don't charge you anything. What I want you to do is start thinking about yourself and how to improve yourself. And I'm probably the cheapest guy out there when it comes to helping young men. And that's not because I think that I'm not worth it. It's because I want to make it accessible to everyone. So do something. Contact THOR, contact HUDs, contact Sam, contact me, contact Laurent, contact Jimmy, anybody. But get in contact with someone and do something. Do something different if you want a different result.
Excellent, Wraith. Appreciate that. And guys, I'm going to tell you out there, here's a positive for you. You can take action immediately. It's the hardest thing to do, but you just take that first step. Talk to people everywhere and do it in a manner in which you are enjoying your life. Things are good. How are you going? I'm living the dream. How about you? How are you doing? What's your dream look like? you're going to get rejected. Of course you are, but it's just water off a duck's back. You have to engage. Step into the arena. The minute you step out of the arena, you can't win. And when it comes to the sexlessness, that's choice. It's not society's result for you. It's a choice of you to take yourself out of the arena. So there's your action right there. There's your solution. Red pill solution is take action. All right. Guys, looks like we're going to give it a good wrap up. Let's do our last words. Good conversation today. Really enjoyed you guys. Let's start and do the roundtable. We'll start with Laurent and see if you got any final comments on, how things are going. You know what? It could be anything. Tell us about how things are over there in Tokyo. What's the aftermath of the assassination?
Actually, nothing really happened.
Okay.
I mean, there was a national funeral, and the reason was this guy was an incel, but it was for similarly religious purposes. It sort of shook the nation because first the guy used a gun and then kill a politician. Well, you kill a politician, that's a problem. You kill 2,000 of them, that's the solution. But that's a different story altogether.
Yeah, but it is kind of loosely because he was a proclaimed a celibate by religious in nature, but I don't understand the religious tie. And he was definitely some kind of social. He had some social issues, or at least beliefs. Were they leaning towards communism? What was the deal there?
I don't know. I didn't really follow, but I didn't really follow. There was a very respectful national funeral of former Vice President Abe. And I mean, this is really unusual in Japan. Really unusual. I've never heard of it. But
it goes to show you one thing, though. I mean, here's a guy that became a celibate for religious natures, but was it sexual frustration that built upon itself? I mean, the guy got determined enough to literally construct a gun out of common everyday parts, which is easier done than you think, and actually kill somebody. And it was very powerful. I mean, sexless men can be very dangerous when unchecked or when there's no availability. Not that this is related, but he kind of was proclaimed as a voluntary, celibate. So very strange over there. But
so on a lighter topic, with you, Thor, and Alex, we're doing the finance lecture series. So this is. I mean, Rafe, I beat you to the punch. You say you're cheap, I beat you. I'm free.
Not really. You're not really free. The value is there. That's not it. You have to commit, though. I saw what your questions are. And when guys have questions, it's not free. You have to put some effort in.
Exactly. It's free, like as in it doesn't cost anything. For people who are behind the paywall in various groups, everybody is welcome. And if other groups from the Manosphere community, they see this and they want to come in, welcome aboard. So the finance lecture series, I mean, we had the first one was very much about the identity. The idea behind this is we all have a version of I'm not enough, or there's something wrong about me. I'm not enough. So when this is the core of identity, I think that comes on top is either a survival mechanism or an adaptation. So if I'm not good enough, if this is the foundation of who I am, and if money permeates all layers of the Maslow pyramid, all layers of the conversation, this is the foundation of our identity. I think that comes on top is going to be flawed. It's not going to work very well. So the first one, we really excavated the foundations and try to build something on top. Now this next one, I'm going to come and take a massive dump on everybody's coffee table. I'm going to talk about the economy, how the economy works. Do you know the pricing of everything? Do you know where your mortgage is priced from? Do you know what your car insurance is priced from? And do you know why, for instance, at the moment the Japanese yen is getting debased? Do you know why? Like all this. So, and also I'm going to prove with a statistical series that truckers have beaten Wall Street gurus and Goldman Sachs gurus since 1967, and probably earlier, but I don't have the data to show it for. So the next one, and I'm also going to talk about crypto. Crypto think, oh, this is an edge and da-da-da-da. It's great, but it's like having a beachfront property 6 miles inland because of global warming. And we're going to go through that. So it's going to be a 1 hour series about the economy, how it works, and so on and so forth. Expect your brain to be deep fried like a Scottish Mars bar. Mm-hmm. And then after that, we're going to talk about psychology. So the psychology of trading, and it's interesting to have Jimmy on board because Jimmy
Yep.
has been very successful with stocks, but he's been, as he said himself, like he just didn't apply the same discipline to crypto. So it's very interesting for me to, this is the psychology of it. So we're going to talk about Donny Kruger, we're going to talk about Bluma Zigarnik, and so on and so forth. So we're going to talk about like really trading psychology from the trenches and as a retailer. And lecture 4 will be like, a lot of people want to make money, muscle, and game, and so they subscribe to this newsletter and that newsletter, and they look to this guru and that guru, and so on and so forth. So, okay, tabula rasa. Now, I'm going to take a massive dump on Guru's table, and I'm going to explain, okay, you need asset allocation and so on and so forth. And after this, we're going to go into trading and other. So the whole lecture is 6 lectures. This thing will change your life. It's not like super, it's not like from professional to professional. It's a vulgarization. It's supposed to be funny. Like, we're going to talk about stop loss and tampons. Like, come on, give me a break. So all this just to help people get to first base and get the right information. Like, for instance, the information that we provide into this panel is very helpful to guys. It gives them the base, and then, as Ray and everybody said, you have to put, and Hud said, you have to put in the work. So we do the same thing with money, because it comes from a conversation that I had with actually Thor and MLD. Shout out to MLD. Is that we talk about money and so on and so forth, but the concepts that we put behind it are not really being tested. Like, it's like men and women talking about love. It's 2 different things. The meaning that we ascribe to it are 2 different things. And this lecture is about giving you the meanings that work, that will help you work in your life. Woo! That was a long
No, that's
lecture.
really fantastic, and really underselling it, because it's a real part of our philosophy on Thor's DragonShip, the monthly mastermind, and by extension HUD's first class is a rising tide lifts all boats. This is building a network, but the value that's offered here, because you're not going to find a lot of this. There's an expert on markets. You've got an expert that's taken a company to an IPO. Not easy to get into. You're going to have to make your effort. Hit me over here at RP Thor on Instagram. I'll tell you how you can get in, but you're going to have to make some effort. That's just what it's going to be, because nothing in life comes without you taking action. May not be money, but you're going to have to take an action in order to access this information and become a part of that tribe. And it's growing fast. So we really appreciate that. And I really appreciate what the guys have put together. Sam,
Yeah.
Sam's involved too, so he's catching up with it right now, and I know he's right there in the thick of Miami, Florida, and he's making some money. So this is going to be brilliant for you, because I know we all want to build our passive incomes and understand the markets so we don't get fleeced. We watch what happened with crypto recently. We want to pay attention, right? And markets have cycles, and they have a personality that you have to learn. And Laurent has made his whole life's living identifying this in the markets. I hope I said that right, Laurent.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Next up.
Yeah, so I can go. Yeah, so it's Fashion Week here in Miami, and so lots of exciting opportunities, lots of tourists coming in town, which are always fun to entertain. And yeah, so here too, I am working a couple of full-time jobs, and also have a side business of developing software, as well as teaching you how to get into the field of software, or accelerating your path on getting that first job. So I can help you with that. So hit me up at Prashanskinator on Instagram, or you can just ping Red Pill Thor, and you can find me in Telegram as well. It's at Sam Prashansky. So that's all I got.
Hoods, did you go yet?
I have not gone yet. I was going to say everything Laurent did, but I can't thank you enough, Laurent. Like, this course, that was amazing last week. And guys, seriously, like, this is like life changing. So if you reach out to me or to Thor or anybody in one of these men's groups, we can make something happen. And I think the biggest thing to bring from today's episode is take action. Just take action. And that's about it. It's all I got to say.
Be an INCEL. Right on, right on. So I think we caught up with everybody, man. Anybody got any final words? If not, I'm going to go ahead and do the boilerplate and take us out.
Yeah, let me say one thing. When you watch red pill content or read red pill content or you watch the news, look at what they say as presenting a problem and start designing solutions for it. Because if you're not designing solutions for it, you're suffering from it. It's that simple. And you're only suffering because you're allowing yourself to be victimized by it. So, by all means, people have made money, people have survived, and people have come out the other side of recessions, depressions, and everything else well. If you're not one of those people, it's because you haven't done anything or taken action to make sure that you're not one of those people. And I agree with HUD. The whole point of this whole show is there's no such thing as incels. There's just men that don't take action.
Absolutely. Love it. It reminds me of a show that I did not too long ago, a few months back, on our greatest skill, problem solving. Greatest skill you can develop, problem solving. That's what Ray just said. Solve your problem. Take action. Thanks, guys. I really don't have much to add other than come check me out on becomedurable.com, IG at rp.thor. You can DM me there. And I'm going to take us out. Guys, Skull.